two profound perspectives collide: Carl Jung and the Buddha. Have you ever paused to ask yourself, who am I really? Beneath the surface of your daily identity, beyond the roles you play, the masks you wear, what remains? This age-old question has perplexed philosophers, mystics, and psychologists for centuries. Remarkably, two profound thinkers, one from the West and one from the East, have offered insights into this riddle that not only challenge our understanding of the self, but also open doors to transformation. Carl Jung, a towering figure in modern psychology, and the Buddha, a spiritual guide whose teachings have shaped countless lives, stand as luminous beacons in this exploration. If you found this reflection meaningful, consider joining our community of seekers on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content, and don't forget to share this video with others who might be inspired by the wisdom of Jung and the Buddha. Together we can explore the mysteries of the self and the boundless potential of the human spirit. In 1939, Jung encountered an ancient Buddhist teaching that shook the foundations of his own work. For decades, he had delved into the human psyche, illuminating its depths and complexities. Yet, the Buddha's doctrine of anatta, or no self, proposed something radical. The self Jung studied so meticulously might not exist at all. Instead of resisting this notion, Jung approached it with curiosity, describing Buddhism as the cleanest, most sensible, and most direct of all religions. How extraordinary must it have been for a Western psychologist to embrace such an unsettling truth? What could he have seen in this 2,500-year-old wisdom? And how can their teachings, when woven together, illuminate the paths of self-discovery, healing, and liberation? Let us journey into their worlds and discover how these two perspectives converge and challenge us to rethink the nature of our existence. Carl Jung's revolutionary concept of the self. Carl Jung's revolutionary concept of the self stands as one of the most profound and transformative ideas in the field of psychology. To Jung, the self was not a fixed or singular entity, but a vast dynamic system that encompassed the conscious and unconscious realms of human experience. He described it as the center and the whole circumference, an idea that challenges conventional understandings of identity by revealing the complexity and interconnectedness of our inner world. This profound insight invites us to look beyond the surface of our awareness and explore the hidden depths that shape who we are. My friend Ahmad Fadid. Imagine an iceberg floating in the vast ocean. The part visible above the water represents the ego, our conscious sense of identity, what we often think of as me. Yet this visible portion is only a small fraction of the whole. Beneath the surface lies an immense structure, the unconscious mind. Within this realm reside the dreams, fears, instincts, and archetypes that subtly but powerfully influence our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. Jung believed that these hidden elements were not random or chaotic, but were organized in ways that reflect universal patterns shared by all humanity. Understanding and integrating these unconscious aspects of the psyche, he argued, was essential for achieving true wholeness and living a fulfilled life. At the heart of Jung's work lies the concept of individuation, a process he described as the journey toward becoming whole. Unlike simply striving for self-improvement or success, individuation involves a deeper, often challenging exploration of the psyche. It requires integrating the unconscious into conscious awareness, reconciling opposing forces within, and embracing every part of ourselves, even the aspects we fear or reject. Jung viewed life as a quest for self-realization, a path that demands courage, curiosity, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. The journey of individuation, according to Jung, unfolds through a series of stages, each of which brings us closer to a state of inner harmony. The first stage is the encounter with the shadow, a term Jung used to describe the parts of ourselves that we fear, deny, or repress. These aspects often represent our darker impulses, unresolved emotions, or qualities we dislike in others, but fail to recognize in ourselves. Facing the shadow can be unsettling. but Jung believed it was a necessary step toward growth. To confront the shadow is to embrace our full humanity, acknowledging both our light and our darkness. The next stage involves engaging with the anima or animus, which Jung described as the inner counterpart to our conscious gender identity. For men, the anima represents their inner feminine qualities, while for women, the animus symbolizes their inner masculine traits. These energies are not bound by societal norms or stereotypes, but reflect the full spectrum of human potential. Integrating the anima or animus fosters balance and harmony, allowing us to move beyond rigid roles and connect more authentically with ourselves and others. This integration is a profound act of self-discovery, as it challenges us to embrace qualities we may have long ignored or undervalued. The final stage of individuation is self-realization, a state of wholeness in which all aspects of the psyche are integrated and aligned. Jung often likened this state to spiritual enlightenment, drawing parallels with the teachings of Buddhism and other wisdom traditions. Self-realization is not about perfection, but about embracing the totality of who we are. It is a state of profound inner peace and balance where we feel connected not only to ourselves but also to the larger fabric of existence. Central to Jung's exploration of the psyche is his concept of archetypes, universal symbols and patterns that resonate across cultures and time. Archetypes, such as the hero, the wise elder, the trickster, and the mother, are the building blocks of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of human experience. These archetypes manifest in myths, dreams, and stories, revealing fundamental truths about the human condition. Jung was particularly fascinated by the mandala, a symbol of wholeness that appears in spiritual traditions around the world. In Buddhist teachings, the mandala represents the interconnected nature of existence, and Jung discovered that similar images often emerged in his patients' dreams, especially during moments of psychological transformation. The recurring appearance of mandalas underscores a universal yearning for balance, harmony, and integration, a reminder that the journey toward wholeness is not only personal, but also universal. Jung's vision of the self challenges us to rethink what it means to be human. Rather than viewing identity as a static or fixed construct, he invites us to see it as a living, evolving system shaped by the interplay of conscious and unconscious forces. This perspective encourages us to embrace life as an unfolding journey where growth arises not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on. Jung's emphasis on integrating the unconscious teaches us that the parts of ourselves we fear or reject often hold the keys to our transformation. By shining a light into the depths of our psyche, we can uncover hidden strengths, heal old wounds, and move closer to a sense of wholeness. Perhaps one of Jung's most enduring contributions is his insistence on the interconnectedness of all things. By exploring the collective unconscious and the archetypes that bind us, he revealed the profound ways in which we are all connected. Our dreams, fears, and desires are not isolated experiences, but reflections of a shared human story. Through the process of individuation, we come to understand that our personal journey is part of something much larger, a universal quest for meaning, balance, and fulfillment. Carl Jung's revolutionary concept of the self invites us to see beyond the surface of our awareness and venture into the depths of our psyche. It challenges us to embrace complexity, integrate opposites, and pursue wholeness in a world that often prioritizes simplicity and division. His ideas resonate not only as psychological insights but also as profound philosophical truths, offering a timeless guide for anyone seeking to understand themselves and their place in the world. The Buddha's radical teaching of no self. The Buddha's teaching of no self, or anatta, is one of the most profound and revolutionary insights in his philosophy, challenging some of humanity's deepest assumptions. The belief in a permanent, unchanging self has been a cornerstone of human identity, shaping our understanding of life, relationships, and the world around us. We often cling to the idea of an enduring I that persists through time, a fixed identity that defines who we are. Yet the Buddha invites us to see this belief for what it truly is, an illusion born from misunderstanding. In the Anatalakkhana Sutta, he explicitly stated, "Form is not self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, mental formations are not self, consciousness is not self." With these words, he opened a pathway for a radical reevaluation of our existence, showing that what we think of as self is not a singular, stable entity, but a collection of impermanent processes. This realization, though unsettling at first, holds the key to liberation, offering freedom from the suffering caused by attachment to a false sense of self. To deepen this understanding, the Buddha introduced the concept of the 5 aggregates or skandhas. These aggregates encompass the entirety of human experience and are the building blocks of what we mistakenly call the self. The first aggregate, form, rupa, refers to the physical body and its interaction with the external world through the senses. The second, feeling, vedana, encompasses sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, that arise from our experiences. Perception, sana, the third aggregate, involves the mental process of recognizing and interpreting sensory input, enabling us to label and understand what we encounter. The fourth, mental formations, sankhara, includes thoughts, emotions, intentions, and habits, which shape our actions and responses. Finally, consciousness, vijnana, the fifth aggregate, is the awareness that connects us to our experiences, allowing us to observe and make sense of them. Together, these 5 aggregates create the illusion of a cohesive self, much like the components of a chariot give the impression of a singular entity. The Buddha used the analogy of a chariot to illustrate this point. When the chariot is dismantled into its individual parts, wheels, axle, frame, it ceases to exist as a chariot. Similarly, when the 5 aggregates are examined individually, we find that none of them, alone or together, constitute an independent, enduring self. The self we so strongly identify with dissolves upon closer inspection, revealing itself as a convenient label for a collection of impermanent and interdependent processes. The implications of this teaching are not merely theoretical or philosophical, they are deeply practical, offering a transformative way to engage with life. By understanding that the self is not a fixed entity, we can begin to let go of the attachments and aversions that cause suffering. Much of our pain arises from clinging to a rigid identity, our desire to be someone, to achieve something, or to maintain an image we have constructed about ourselves. For instance, when we think of ourselves as successful, we may become consumed by the fear of failure. If we identify as kind or compassionate, any moment of anger or frustration might lead to feelings of guilt. Similarly, if we see ourselves as victims, we might perpetuate cycles of anger or helplessness, unable to move beyond the pain of the past. These fixed identities trap us, binding us to the suffering that comes with them. The Buddha's insight into no-self invites us to step away from these self-imposed limitations. It encourages us to see ourselves as fluid, ever-changing, and interconnected with the world around us. When we stop clinging to a fixed identity, we open ourselves to the freedom of simply being. Without the pressure to define or prove ourselves, we can experience life with greater ease and flexibility. The Buddha described this as the path to purification, saying, "When one sees with wisdom that all phenomena are not self, one grows weary of suffering. This weariness does not lead to despair, but to a deep sense of peace, as it frees us from the endless cycles of attachment and craving." Living without attachment to a fixed self allows us to embrace the impermanence of life. It does not mean abandoning purpose or direction, but rather approaching life with openness and mindfulness. When we see the self as a process rather than a permanent entity, we become less reactive, more present, and more compassionate. Challenges and conflicts lose their power to define us because we understand that they are transient, part of the ever-changing flow of life. We can observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming entangled in them, recognizing their impermanence and letting them pass like clouds in the sky. This understanding also transforms our relationships with others. By seeing that others too are not fixed selves, but dynamic processes, we cultivate greater empathy and compassion. We realize that their actions and behaviors are influenced by their own aggregates, shaped by causes and conditions beyond their control. This perspective helps us to respond with kindness and understanding, rather than judgment or resentment. The Buddha's teaching of no-self ultimately challenges us to let go of who we think we are. It invites us to move beyond the illusions we cling to and to discover the boundless potential of what we might become. In relinquishing the false security of a permanent self, we gain the freedom to live with authenticity, spontaneity, and joy. This path of liberation is not about erasing individuality or denying existence. It is about seeing clearly the nature of reality and embracing it with wisdom and compassion. Through the lens of no-self, we come to understand that true freedom lies not in holding on, but in letting go. It is a profound journey of transformation, leading to a life of greater peace, understanding, and connection. Meeting of minds, Jung and the Buddha. At first glance, the teachings of Carl Jung and the Buddha might appear to diverge significantly. Jung's psychological framework focuses on the exploration of the self, while the Buddha's teachings center on the idea of no-self. These concepts seem almost oppositional, yet a deeper examination reveals a profound harmony between their perspectives, particularly in their shared emphasis on transcending the ego. Both figures, in their unique ways, guide us toward a state of being that frees us from the confines of rigid identities, offering a path to greater understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And so, for Jung, the ego is a critical starting point in the journey of self-realization. It acts as a necessary tool for navigating life, providing structure and enabling individuals to interact with the external world. However, Jung did not see the ego as the ultimate goal of human development. Instead, he believed that true self-realization, the process he called individuation, requires moving beyond the ego's limitations. This involves integrating the unconscious aspects of the psyche and discovering a deeper, holistic center of being, which Jung referred to as the self. The self, in Jungian terms, is a transcendent and unifying presence that harmonizes all aspects of the personality, including the conscious and unconscious mind. The journey to this state is not easy. It requires confronting the shadow, the repressed, often darker aspects of oneself, and embracing the fullness of one's existence. The Buddha's teachings on no-self, anatta, might initially seem at odds with Jung's concept of the self. The Buddha emphasized that the idea of a fixed, unchanging self is an illusion and a primary source of human suffering. This illusion creates attachment and craving, which bind individuals to the cycle of suffering, dukkha. Liberation, according to the Buddha, comes from seeing through this illusion and realizing the impermanence of all things, including the self. The path to this realization involves practices like mindfulness and meditation, which cultivate awareness and detachment from the ego's grasp. By letting go of clinging to a solidified identity, one can experience the freedom and peace of nirvana. Although Jung and the Buddha use different language and focus on different aspects of the human experience, their teachings converge in a profound way. Both recognize that clinging to rigid notions of self and ego creates limitations that prevent true freedom and connection. For Jung, the transcendence of the ego allows for the integration of the psyche and the discovery of a deeper, more authentic self. For the Buddha, transcending the illusion of self leads to liberation and a direct experience of reality as it is. Both perspectives offer a pathway to a state of awareness that transcends the ego, enabling individuals to connect not only with their true nature, but also with others and the world in a more profound way. Another striking parallel between Jung and the Buddha lies in their understanding of suffering. Far from seeing suffering as merely a burden to be avoided, both recognized its transformative potential. For Jung, suffering often arises from the tension between conscious and unconscious forces within the psyche. Psychological distress is a signal that there is unresolved material in the unconscious that needs to be addressed. This suffering, while painful, can become a gateway to growth when approached with courage and openness. By facing one's pain and engaging with it through introspection, dreams, and symbolic work, an individual can achieve integration and healing. Jung believed that this process of confronting and transforming suffering is essential for individuation and becoming one's true self. The Buddha, too, saw suffering as a central aspect of the human experience, but he approached it from a slightly different angle. In his Four Noble Truths, the Buddha identified suffering as universal and traced its root cause to attachment and craving. Rather than seeing suffering as something to be eliminated through external means, the Buddha taught that it could be transcended through inner transformation. Mindfulness, one of the core practices of the Buddha's teachings, allows individuals to observe their suffering with clarity and without judgment. This practice helps uncover the impermanence and conditioned nature of suffering, paving the way for liberation. Both Jung and the Buddha suggest that suffering holds the seeds of transformation and growth. For Jung, it is through grappling with psychological pain that one can integrate the fragmented parts of the psyche and achieve wholeness. For the Buddha, suffering is the impetus for awakening and liberation from the cycle of birth and rebirth. In both frameworks, suffering is not an end, but a beginning, a doorway to a deeper understanding of oneself and the nature of existence. The interplay between Jung's psychological theories and the Buddha's spiritual teachings reveals a shared vision of human potential. While their approaches differ, both recognize that transcending the ego and engaging with suffering are essential steps on the path to freedom and fulfillment. Could it be, then, that our greatest wounds and challenges are not obstacles to overcome, but invitations to transform? From Jung's process of individuation to the Buddha's journey to enlightenment, the human experience is portrayed as a dynamic and ever-evolving process of growth. By embracing these teachings, we can move beyond the confines of the ego and suffering to discover a state of freedom, connection, and profound understanding, applying their wisdom in modern life. The wisdom of Jungian psychology and Buddhist mindfulness, when brought together, creates a profound and transformative approach to modern life. These two traditions, though emerging from different times and cultures, intersect in their understanding of the human mind and the path toward healing and growth. Together, they offer a pathway to explore the depths of our psyche, embrace life's complexities, and connect with others on a more meaningful level. In the realm of healing, the integration of Jung's exploration of the unconscious and Buddhist mindfulness has opened new doors to therapeutic practices. One notable example is dream work, a practice Jung championed as a way to access the symbols and archetypes within our subconscious. Dreams, in Jungian thought, are not random images, but rather meaningful messages from the deeper layers of the psyche. When approached with the non-judgmental awareness cultivated through Buddhist mindfulness, dream work becomes a gentle yet powerful tool. It encourages individuals to sit with the images and emotions that arise in their dreams without clinging to them or pushing them away. For example, a person haunted by recurring dreams of being lost might, through mindful observation, come to see this image as an invitation to explore feelings of uncertainty or transformation in their waking life. Instead of fearing these dreams, they may begin to welcome them as opportunities for self-discovery. Another therapeutic approach that benefits from this integration is contemplative psychotherapy. This practice combines Jung's depth psychology with Buddhist principles of compassion and presence. By learning to sit with pain and discomfort without identifying with them, individuals can transform their relationship with suffering. Techniques like mindful breathing, visualization, and compassionate self-inquiry help people recognize the patterns of their pain and release the grip of self-judgment. For instance, someone struggling with feelings of inadequacy might practice viewing these emotions as passing phenomena rather than as defining truths about their identity. Over time, this shift can lead to profound healing as they begin to see themselves not as flawed, but as human, capable of growth and self-compassion. The interplay between Jungian and Buddhist insights also has a profound impact on personal growth and relationships. Identity, a central theme in Jungian psychology, is explored not as a fixed construct, but as a dynamic interplay of various facets of the self. This aligns with the Buddhist notion of impermanence, which teaches that nothing, including our sense of self, is static. By embracing this fluidity, individuals can free themselves from the rigid roles and labels that often confine them. A person who is always identified as a perfectionist, for example, might come to see that their worth is not tied to their achievements. Instead, they may begin to appreciate the beauty of their imperfections and the lessons they bring. This newfound freedom allows for a more authentic expression of the self. In relationships, the combined wisdom of Jung and the Buddha encourages humility, curiosity, and a release of ego-driven expectations. Imagine the richness of a relationship where both parties meet each other as they are, without projecting their desires or fears onto one another. This approach fosters deeper connections as individuals become more open to understanding and appreciating the unique journeys of those they care about. A parent who has always envisioned their child following a specific path might, for instance, come to support the child's individuality with genuine curiosity and love. Similarly, friendships and partnerships can flourish when both parties prioritize understanding over control and connection over judgment. The transformative power of these teachings is evident in real-life examples. One woman, overwhelmed by anxiety, found freedom by adopting the Buddhist perspective of viewing her mind as the sky and her thoughts as passing clouds. This metaphor, coupled with Jung's emphasis on self-awareness, allowed her to observe her anxious thoughts without being consumed by them. Over time, this practice helped her replace fear with a sense of peace, as she realized that her thoughts, like clouds, would come and go. Another powerful example is the story of a corporate leader who embraced a more compassionate approach to his role. Initially driven by a need for control and authority, he found inspiration in the idea of stewardship, a concept that resonates with both Jungian and Buddhist principles. By seeing himself as a guide and servant rather than a ruler, he cultivated greater empathy and understanding in his interactions with his team. This shift not only improved his relationships at work, but also brought him a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment. These stories highlight the transformative potential of integrating Jungian psychology and Buddhist mindfulness into everyday life. Whether through exploring the symbols in our dreams, embracing the impermanence of our identity, or approaching relationships with humility, these teachings offer a way to navigate life's challenges with grace and insight. They remind us that healing and growth are possible when we learn to observe our inner world with compassion and openness. How might you bring these teachings into your own journey? What changes could arise if you viewed challenges as opportunities for growth, or approached your relationships with greater curiosity and understanding? The possibilities are as vast as the human spirit, waiting to be explored with courage and mindfulness. Conclusion: Two wings of a bird. The teachings of Jung and the Buddha can be seen as two wings of a bird, each essential and complementary, enabling us to soar into deeper understanding of the self and its mysteries. Jung approaches the self as a dynamic process of integration, a journey of bringing together the fragmented parts of our psyche into a unified whole. The Buddha, on the other hand, reveals the self as an illusion, a construct without permanence or solidity. Though their perspectives differ, they converge in their ultimate goal: liberation from the confines of ego and identity. Together, their wisdom offers a profound map for navigating the human experience, showing us that our struggles with identity, though often painful, can become doorways to the vast, transformative wisdom that lies within. Jung once wrote, "The goal of Eastern religious practice is the same as that of Western psychology, the shifting of the center of gravity from the ego to the self." This observation highlights a shared aspiration between these traditions to transcend the narrow, limited perspective of the ego and move toward something greater, whether it is Jung's concept of the self or the Buddha's vision of enlightenment. The Buddha, with characteristic simplicity, echoed this truth in his teachings. Like a water bubble, like a mirage, one who regards the world in this way finds liberation. His words remind us that clinging to the illusion of the self only deepens our suffering, while releasing it can open the gates to freedom. The convergence of these ideas invites a deeply personal question. Who are you beneath the layers of stories you tell yourself? Beyond the roles, the achievements, the fears, and the expectations, what remains? Is there something essential, unchanging? Or is the answer not something to uncover, but something to let go? Perhaps the self as we know it is not a treasure to be discovered, but a weight to be unburdened. In releasing the grip of ego and identity, we may find that what lies beyond is not emptiness, but a spacious, boundless potential for being. These teachings urge us to pause and reflect. They ask us to sit with the questions that stir our hearts and challenge the assumptions we carry. What happens when we let go of the need to define ourselves? What new possibilities emerge when we relinquish the boundaries of I and embrace the fluid, interconnected nature of existence? For some, this may mean shedding the layers of self-doubt and stepping into their innate wholeness. For others, it might involve dissolving the barriers that separate them from others, cultivating deeper compassion and connection. The journey, though unique for each individual, shares a universal essence, a movement toward freedom, authenticity, and a profound sense of peace. Jung and the Buddha remind us that we are not our struggles, nor our triumphs, nor the fleeting identities we construct to navigate the world. We are something more expansive, more fluid, and ultimately more free. Their wisdom challenges us to look inward, to examine the stories we cling to, and to release what no longer serves us. It is in this letting go that we discover the profound truth of being, not as a fixed entity, but as an ever-evolving dance of awareness, interconnected with all that is. Take a moment to sit with these reflections. What do Jung's and the Buddha's teachings awaken within you? How do they challenge or affirm your understanding of yourself and the world? Perhaps you feel inspired to delve deeper into your inner landscape, to question the boundaries you've drawn around your identity. Or perhaps you find comfort in the thought that you are already whole, just as you are. Whatever arises, know that this exploration is not one to be done alone. By sharing our insights and experiences, we can support one another in uncovering the boundless possibilities of what it truly means to be. So, I leave you with this. What might you discover if you were to release the grip of the self, step beyond the illusion, and embrace the infinite potential that lies within? The answer perhaps is not in the finding, but in the freedom of letting go.